This is John Paul Mendoza with It's a Paul World, and we have a very special guest. In fact, she ran for president, and that means president for the United States. And we have the one, the only, Dr. Jo Jorgensen. Welcome.
So glad to be here. Thanks.
So what was it like to run as a presidential candidate in that wild year of 2020?
Well, busier than I ever thought it could be, but also a lot more fun than I thought it could be. But it was really exciting. We were on the ballot in all 50 states. We are the only party other than the Democrats and Republicans to be on the ballot in all 50 states in back-to-back consecutive elections a couple of times.
Well, that's excellent. So what motivated you to say, I want to run for the president of the United States?
I thought that I could communicate the message more, that our country really is in a downward spiral with government doing more and more, taking over our lives. And I think that we should be able to make our own choices in life.
So how well did you end up doing as this libertarian? I mean, it's very good to having all 50 states back to back. It's time that, we actually saw a third party start to emerge. Yep. It took a long time to get there. So what do you think that we really need to think about going forward? I think that's where we are now. Let's think about going forward. Past is the past. So what are you going to do about going forward?
Well, I've joined People for Liberty. I'm the president of the board, and I hope to keep the momentum going. And by the way, I got the second highest vote totals in Libertarian Party history. And I think what shows even more what people are looking for is that my first run, I beat Gary Johnson's first run, even though he had been a two-term governor. So the fact that I've never been elected to office, and yet people voted for me, shows that there's a turning of the tide, that people really are looking for an alternative.
So there's a hunger that says, listen, we have a two-party system, it's broken, it doesn't seem to really reflect what we want to do. Each party is spending money wildly, and we're over-regulated. We have all of those things going on, and maybe it's time for a sense that liberty has still a flicker of light. So are you optimistic?
Yeah, because, let me mention, nobody else is going to do it. And I understand why people voted for Trump, because he came in, said, I'm a businessman, I know how to balance the budget, I'm going to cut the debt, cut the deficit. But he did the opposite. He grew government bigger than Obama did. So that just shows, if even Trump, who's an outsider, can't do it, then we need somebody else to do it, like a third party. So that's why I joined People for Liberty, to keep the movement going, to broaden it so that, because so many people, they hear about libertarians each presidential cycle. So they hear about the they hear about the Libertarian Party, and then they don't hear anything for 4 years, and then they hear about it again. So we're going to try to stay out in the forefront. I had quite a Facebook following, a lot of Twitter followers, so we want to keep the momentum going for the future.
So there was almost like a hibernation period every exactly. Time.
That's a good term.
Okay, so we get through with the election. Oh, libertarians didn't win. Nobody happened. So what are some of the ways that People for Liberty are trying to change that and shift that constrained vision? I think that's the right way to say it, constrained vision. How do we change that?
Yeah, well, first of all, we're just trying to spread the word, because I was so surprised. Let me give you an example. Somebody told me, a friend of mine went to the ballot to vote. And after he voted, he calls me up and he says, yeah, I went to vote. And they had Trump's name and Biden's name. And then they had this other name, Jo Jorgensen. Who's he? And so the fact that people go into the ballot booth not even knowing that there's another option. So we're trying to spread the word to let people know there is an option, because a lot of times when they hear the option, they do like it.
And are you working at a local level? Are you trying to get more people on the grassroots?
Grassroots. In fact, grassroots would be our number one word. So to give you an example of something we did recently is I wished everybody a happy Easter. Now, I've wished them other holidays as well. And everybody who liked that was put in contact with the Christians for Liberty group. So within People for Liberty, we've got Christians for Liberty, Second Amendment for Liberty, Veterans for Liberty. We've got different groups who are having conversations to try to spread the word and grow the movement.
And by doing that, by segmenting is the right way to say it, by segmenting that, what you're doing is you're finding like-minded people. Exactly. And explaining to them how liberty affects their particular area of life.
Wow, you could almost write our website for us, couldn't you?
I wonder who would think that.
Very good.
Okay. So I appreciate the compliment. So we're out there right. You're out there right now. You're trying to get some grassroots things going. So talk about some of the candidate recruitment, because I think that's really important, because you got to find the local people to make this happen, right?
Right. Now, I'm not a part of that. That's something that the Libertarian Party is looking into or doing, as well as at the state level. So we're trying to support candidates at the state and local level. And by the way, that's what my campaign did, in that when we got names, when people joined the movement, we passed those names along to candidates, what we say down ballot, so that they could contact them and let them know that they were running, rather than having our different silos. So we share information to try to grow numbers.
So People for Liberty, if I could characterize what you just said, is that People for Liberty is saying we need to have people become more consciously aware, understand that there's more than one cycle, and finally take that kind of sense that liberty is important in their lives. The third thing is to now understand that if liberty is important in your life, then when a candidate appears, they can then connect the two dots. Is that kind of where we're coming to?
Exactly, yes. And to also share ideas, because so many people, as I mentioned, haven't really heard of the Libertarian Party, and they say, well, what about this, what about that? And they haven't really thought about these issues.
So where is People for Liberty? How do people find out about it, and how do they get there?
Yes, it's people, the number 4, liberty.org. So peopleforliberty.org.
And they go there, they can sign up, they can find out information, and then they can get involved if they want. Now, are there local chapters around the U.S., or is it really at a virtual level at this point in time?
Oh, no, there are local chapters. In fact, we had our first National Day of Service on May 1st. We're trying to take May Day back from the communists. And there were local people all over the country coming up with different volunteer efforts. And there were some that made media and got on the local news showing what they were doing. So no, we've got actually people out there in action. And right now with the crisis at the border, which Biden has apparently made worse, we didn't think it could get any worse, and it has. So there's been a demand there. So we've started Liberty on the Border, where people are going down there to actually physically help what's going on.
Excellent. Well, before we wrap up, so what are 2 or 3 items that everybody out there should know about? So, because we have so much negativity, so much pessimism, so much sense of despondency, what's the upbeat positive? Dr. Joe, give us that light maybe at the end of the tunnel that we can steer towards, which may be liberty, but tell us how we get there from here to there.
Well, how we get there, I would say, would be to join the libertarian movement. But here's my hope, and here's where I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In the 90s, I ran I was the 1996 vice presidential candidate, and I ran for U.S. House in 92. And I would talk to people and say, education should be at a local level. You should be able to control, parents, teachers, and students should decide what's going on, and parents should have control. And it didn't really go over well, because a lot of parents were saying, oh, I'm happy enough with the government. And I would point out, but you realize this is a government monopoly and you're not getting any choice. And they would say, well, but I'm still happy with it. And now what do we see? We see parents begging the school board, please let my child attend in person. Please don't make my child wear a mask. Please don't teach my child CRT. And now people are realizing, now that government has touched them personally, now people are realizing, maybe government is taking over our lives too much. Maybe we should have the choice to decide on our health care, on the education, on our retirement, and everything else. And so I think people are beginning to get fed up now that government has grown to the point that it's taking over everything, and that parents are feeling so powerless. People are beginning to feel powerless, and they don't like it, and they're showing up in droves.
Well, and maybe we can touch on that before we go, which is, let's talk a little bit about COVID and the whole libertarian movement and liberty, and how COVID is actually in some ways brought a light to liberty in a way that no one could have done before. So what do you see on that front?
Yeah, and I hate to talk about a silver lining because it has been tragic, but a lot of people realize, wait, what do you mean the government can shut down my business? What do you mean the government tells me I have to force people to wear masks? What do you mean I've got a restaurant and I can only serve people outside when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground? And people, again, that's just like the education, where people realize that, okay, government has more control than I thought they did, and I don't like it. And I thought this was America. I thought we got to make our own choices. I thought we got to start our own companies. And I'd like to mention that 3 of my grandparents are immigrants. And one of my grandmothers is the one who really gave me the love of my country. And she would talk about the old country, how, the government takes all your money, and how, everybody has the same. And here you can start your own business, which, she was never rich here. But the country she was talking about was Denmark. It will not, you might think she was talking about the USSR or something, but she was talking about Denmark. And to listen to her talk about this great country, how you can start your own business and make your own decisions, that's not really the America that we're seeing nowadays. And I think people are realizing that.
Well, excellent. On that note, I just want to thank Dr. Jo Jorgensen. I appreciate that I get to talk to somebody who ran for president on all 50 states, and it was really a great privilege. What I would say is go to people number 4 for Liberty, people number 4 for Liberty.org, and check it out and see. And she put in a lot of effort and a lot of time, and you know what? Liberty is always worth fighting for and working for. And we tend to take it for granted because we have had it so easy in a lot of ways. I know people don't think that, but we do now after the situation has happened. Dr. Jo Jorgensen, thank you very much. Really appreciate you being on today.
Thanks. I had a great time.